I found out from my parents that Milwaukee was just the only city that would sponsor them. Milwaukee is really giving me a home. It's giving me an opportunity. It's giving my family an opportunity as an Eritrean. I was just going to school. I was an African booty scratcher, right? That's just what it was. It was the jokes of just being African. African was not what it is today, right? Culturally, today is way more accepted, and it's just way more of a vibe today. I have a more mastered version of this, where I have Eritrean community. My culture is my top priority. It is everything about me. It is what I'm prideful about, and I'm able to really mix them both beautifully. People are gonna hate me regardless. People are not gonna like me regardless of if they know me or if they don't know me or not. So I should really just be who I am and not worry about that. I knew that ultimately I needed to make that jump away from myself. I just got to be able to see myself so much bigger than I was.
So guys, your host Ben Arthur here, and welcome to the first episode of Pinnacle Code 2.0, where we'll be focusing on elevating first and second generation Black Americans through conversations around identity, Blackness, and achievement. Today's guest is my good friend Aron Yohannes. He is Eritrean American, raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He is a Washington D.C. based editorial writer and strategist for Mozilla. Prior to that, worked at Amazon, and before that had a career in sports journalism, which is how we became acquainted and built a relationship. In that sports media career, he covered the Milwaukee Bucks and also worked as an in-house digital media producer for the Seattle Seahawks. So he was creating content for the team, did a lot of cool projects. And that's specifically where we met. While he was doing that, that's when I was back home in Seattle covering the Seahawks for SeattlePI.com. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. And without any further ado, let's go. How do you think your Milwaukee upbringing was shaped by the fact that you came up in an Eritrean family?
Man, it's so funny to think about because Milwaukee doesn't really have like a huge like Eritrean population. Like
Mm.
it's a sizable population now, but when I was younger, I used to always ask my parents all the time. I'm like, why did we go to Milwaukee? Like why there's so many other Eritrean cities, right? Chicago is just south of us, right? It's pretty big Eritrean population. You know, DC is like
Mm.
the Eritrean capital of the United States, right? There's
Mm.
Seattle, of course. There's so many places, and I always wondered why did we get stuck in Milwaukee? And I found out from my parents that Milwaukee was just the only city that would sponsor them. And so when my parents came to
Mm.
America, they got sponsored by a family at a church called All Saints in Milwaukee. I'm sorry, not All Saints, Good Shepherd. And there was a family that sponsored us and gave us opportunity. And so I look back honestly at it now as like Milwaukee has always been like an opportunity for me. Milwaukee is really giving me a home. It's giving me an opportunity. It's giving my family an opportunity as an Eritrean. And there's so many other places that I could have been, right? But I'm really grateful now as a 31-year-old to look back and look at my time in Milwaukee, like how it has shaped me, right? There's a Bugs bobblehead above me, a whole bunch of Milwaukee stuff all over my apartment and whatnot, right? Like Milwaukee is a part of me forever now. And it has helped me grow into the person that I am. And so many of the principles about like people like hardworking people in Milwaukee and people that have built like a community and all the values of the city of Milwaukee have been like really instilled in me now as like an adult.
Mhm.
And so I always just look at Milwaukee, especially from like an Eritrean perspective, as a place of opportunity. You know, it gave my family opportunity. It gave me an opportunity, like to cover the Bucks when I was in college. It's like crazy, you know, to cover an NBA team, right? And just that's another like a connection of like opportunity. So that's how I always kind of look at like the connection between like my culture and Milwaukee is that well, it just gave everybody an opportunity. And to this day, there's still not as much as like before, but there's still like Eritrean refugees I think that come to Milwaukee because they get an opportunity there. And now my parents and other people in the community are able to like help people find jobs that come over to America to Milwaukee and to give them jobs and to help them find opportunities as well and try to pass that forward. So that's kind of how I've always seen like the connection between the two is how much opportunity and the things that it's provided for my family and my culture.
When you speak of that opportunity that Milwaukee provided you and your family, how is that shaped, or maybe how did that shape when you were growing up, when you still did start to understand, okay, family had an opportunity to come here. I'm the first generation of my family to kind of come up in the US. How did that shape maybe your drive, your motivations and whatnot?
Yeah, it was big. I think it's kind of two parts. One, it was super motivating because obviously, like, there weren't that many other like Eritreans like my age. Like there was like a few in the city, but I always kind of looked at it as like, man, I gotta make it out of here, right? As an Eritrean, first of all, and then also as like a young African American in Milwaukee. You know, Milwaukee's a really hard city for African Americans, and so I kind of looked at it as a double whammy in a sense, where it's like, I'm already here, where my family didn't have anything, and I gotta get it out the mud out here to make a life for myself. You know, they've given me the framework, they've given me the opportunity to go to school, so I gotta go make the best of it. And they gotta be able to, I gotta take advantage of that. And then there's just also just like, the side of it that's funny to look back at it now, where it's like, as an Eritrean, like back then, like when I was in high school, this is like 2007 to 2011, being an Eritrean wasn't like how it is today. You know, at
Mm.
that time, I was just going to school. I was an African booty scratcher, right? Like that's just what it was. It was the jokes of just being African. Like African was like not what it is today, right? Like this as
Mhm.
another African. Like our culturally today is way more accepted, and it's just way more of a vibe today to be African, and it's so much more
Mm.
culturally accepted, right?
Mhm.
And like today, you could wear a dashiki to school, and it's a fashion statement, right? You know,
Mhm.
look at Zara or any other brands that like kind of use that today, right? That it's okay, it's totally acceptable. But as a kid, like that wasn't the case. You know, I was going to school and I was seen as the African, and of course,
Mhm.
there's some other things a part of the culture, right? Like, oh, yeah, my parents came to parent teacher press conferences, right, or parent teacher conferences. Parents are not like completely fluent in English, right? So there's an accent, right? And you get looked at differently then, right? And now that might be a little bit different, So there was also, I think, there was challenges to it because at the time it wasn't really culturally accepted in a way, being African and being Eritrean. Like nobody at that time had absolutely no clue what it meant to be Eritrean or what it was to be Eritrean. And now today, it's like it's a little bit different. There's still some people that don't 100% know it, but it's a little bit more, it's much more accepted, I should say, today. So I think definitely it was a challenge in some way, but it was really motivating for me, and I think especially as I got older, going through high school, I knew I wanted to be in journalism and I knew I wanted to do something with that. And there weren't any Eritrean journalists for me to really go off of to get inspired by. So there was those challenges too, right? Of just like being like,
Yeah.
okay, am I gonna be one of the first people to actually kind of do this thing, right? I got to kind of defy the odds to get out of Milwaukee. I got to defy the odds to, get a good education and make a career out of myself as an Eritrean. And then there's also like I got to do both of those things plus try to fit into this niche career that's already also really hard for African Americans to get into as well.
Mhm.
So it was a bunch of different challenges altogether, honestly.
What's so I want to go back there a second because you talked about how it wasn't really cool to be African, so to speak, until very recently. And I'm wondering about like your perception of kind of why that is, because it was the same thing for me growing up, right? Like I didn't even really know what it meant to be Ghanaian American. I always, honestly, man, I always felt weird about wearing dashikis or any traditional garb. Like I
Yeah,
didn't want to be looked differently or people looking at me.
yeah,
And there's clearly been a shift. It's probably due to a number of factors, but I'm curious about why you think that's changed, and then also how you've because you also do identify as like African American, right? And I think we can both agree that maybe there's a separation uh in terms of like you're African and then you're just kind of like Black American. So how have you maybe grappled with that, and then also just the fact that that identity thing is that kind of the circumstances we came up in, now it's cool, it's almost cool to be kind of guys like us now. When we were kids, it wasn't. You were just kind of like the other Black kid.
yeah. I think about this often as to why it's so different now. Like because it really is like this isn't we ain't talking about a little bit of a change here, right? Like we're
Mhm.
talking like a real
Drastic, bro.
drastic change. Where like
Yeah.
again, like I mentioned and like you said, like you can go to a school now with a daishiki and it ain't weird. Like it's just like it's culturally you getting a fit off if you go to a high school today with like a real daishiki on or some real traditional clothing, right? like it is such a different world today. And I think part of it, I think, is just some of the celebrities over the years that have like kind of brought awareness to it, right? I think, for
Mhm.
example, like Nipsey Hussle, recipes is Eritrean, right? Like he brought so much awareness to music as an Eritrean, but also just
Mhm.
like when people saw Nipsey Hussle, they saw an Eritrean now too, right? Like to be able to bring that type of exposure. Um,
Mhm.
I have some varying opinions about her, but a few years ago, Tiffany Haddish, I think at the Oscars, I can't remember what award show she was at. And in the award show, she wore a dress that had like traditional Eritrean clothing in it. And
Mm.
so like that was like a huge stage to bring awareness to like Eritrean culture and like our clothing and like our designs and things like that, right? And so I think, and then also like, a few years ago, Nate Berhe played in the NFL. He was drafted by the Giants. He was the first Eritrean safety, uh, first Eritrean NFL player. That's another dude that just brought more awareness to it. So I think for like, I think in Africans, like it's become a mixture of like these celebrities and athletes that have brought awareness to it. And I think also, if I'm being honest, I think also you just look at like how much Black people, I don't want to say Black power or anything has like changed over the years, but but there's so much more like pride in pride now being Black, right? Like look at like some of the music that's being put out, right? Because of unfortunately a lot of different things that are happening against Black people, but there's just so much more awareness. There's so much more public speaking about like being Black and being African and like the culture in general, right? So I think that's also contributed to it as well. Just all these different factors that have like kind of helped bring more awareness to it. And it's so crazy to really think about it, man. Again, like there's so many people now that can just wear Eritrean clothing, and it's totally fine, right? Like you're not gonna get looked at, you're not gonna get judged. Somebody's going like now you're getting asked like, "Yo, what are you?" Right? Like in a good way versus like when you're younger and it wasn't like this. When people were like, "Oh, he's just an African," and it was like in a negative connotation, right? Like it's a real positive thing now to be
Mhm.
looked at as like uniqueness to show your to show uniqueness as your culture and stuff like that, right? So it's like it's just a fascinating stage that we're kind of in now. I think there's just a bunch of different things that have contributed to it. I don't think it's still 100% perfect, but
Yeah.
man, it just feels a lot better to know I could wear like an Eritrean jersey or whatever it is, and people give me compliments on it now, and not being like, "Yo, you're an African booty scratcher," like when you're younger or whatever it is.
Yeah. I'm wondering, kind of going off of that theme though, of maybe a growing acceptance of kind of like African culture within like mainstream Black American culture. Like just with the way you identify, maybe how has that changed over time? Because like for me, it was always weird because like I grew up in an environment that was predominantly white and Asian in the suburbs of Seattle. Um, but then so I didn't really identify with them. And then like the Black people in Seattle, like I would interact with, I didn't really feel like I related to them. And then like Africans, I didn't feel like I identified with them either because I was too American for them.
Yeah,
So I think that's a really interesting dichotomy for people who are in shoes like ours because we are almost between cultures, so to speak. And I just feel like from my experience, it was very pronounced because of that. I think it took me a really long time to just start embracing more who I am. And I think, like we've talked about, the changing of the guard, so to speak, has maybe made that easier in the public eye. But I'm wondering how you've grappled with your identity as, a Black person, as a Eritrean American Black man, knowing that maybe you do sit between cultures, like your
yeah,
context at home is maybe different, but then also you did grow up here and whatnot.
yeah,
So how have you looked at your identity?
yeah. It's been fascinating because I think when I was younger, I didn't. So I'm not fluent in Tigrinya, our language, and I grew up being like American, right? Like I grew up in Milwaukee. I grew up going to Milwaukee public schools. I grew up around Black people. I didn't grow up. I grew up. My parents are obviously Eritrean. All my siblings are. And it's a community, right? But it's not when it's not as deep as like a Chicago or like a DC, right? Where the main people that you hang out with all the time and your community, your friends all the time are Eritrean, right? You grow up into like when you're in a city like Milwaukee, you naturally just gravitate to Americans, right? Like to the black
Mhm.
people at school, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
like it just wasn't the majority of like my friends or like my population, right? So growing up, I was very much into my culture and like I would go do a whole bunch of like things with my parents all the time. They would take me to church with them in Chicago for service. My parents did traditional Eritrean things all the time. It was weird in a way where it was like I really did had to balance it, right? And as a kid, I think I didn't know like how to really balance it. I just knew that I just wanted to be accepted and just have a good time in both of these cultures and just and enjoy both of them for what they were. So like when I'm at school, I'm with my black friends, right? And then I'm at home and I'm
Mm.
with my parents and my culture and like my community of people, right? So I think it was a little bit of that way where it was like I kind of, I had to balance them both because at school, like again, like I hung out with mostly just the black people, right? So it was there, and then away from that, when I came home, I was Eritrean in a way,
Mm.
because when I come home, I ain't under Black American rules. I'm under Eritrean rules, right? My mama and daddy they speaking Tigrinya to me. They're telling me I can't do this and that. I can't play this and that. No, it's none of that American. It's like Eritrean. The boundaries at home are like Eritrean, right? So it's like at
Mhm.
home, I was very much rooted in my culture, and then I had to go to school, and because there just wasn't other people there, I kind of had to be American in a way. And it kind of again gets back to the point I was making before about like how it just wasn't like socially accepted, right? If I was going to school and like being Eritrean was like a thing, right? Like people loved it, right? I would have been the same Eritrean me that I was at home, at school, and it would have been perfectly fine. It would have been an easy, smooth transition, right? But I felt like a lot of times at school, to fit in with my friends at school, I had to be American, right? Because it just
Yeah.
wasn't accepted at that point, right? It just wasn't. I was the African, so it was very different. I just try to blend in with my friends as an American.
Mm.
So growing up in that way, you just really had to combat both of them in that type of way. And then I think as I got
Mm.
older and as I become an adult now, like I have a more mastered version of this, right? Where I have Eritrean community, my culture is my top priority. It is like everything about me. It is what I'm prideful about, and I'm able to really like kind of mix them both beautifully in a way where, for example, like I take pride in being, well, I don't say being because I've transitioned away from journalism, but I took pride in being an Eritrean like American journalist, right? Like being a
Mm.
journalist in America that's Eritrean. Like there aren't many of us that were actually doing it. Like it's only a handful of people that were doing that, right? I took a lot of pride in that and being able to, move away from battling both of these things when I was younger to now, like I'm older, and I'll figure out a way to like really tie them in a really smart and great way where I could really showcase and spotlight both being an American and a Black American, and also an Eritrean too. So now it's like now I'm older, and I'm like, yeah, I always tell people like, I'm Eritrean when they ask me what I am, but it's that's kind of like the first step for me now. Now it's more socially acceptable to be Eritrean, and I'm not getting called an African in that type of way no more. It's so much easier for me to just be able to dominantly tell people I'm Eritrean now, and to go that way, and to tell people about my culture, to like, to now inspire people as well. Like it's a lot different now. It's so as an adult now, it's kind of flipped in a way, but definitely a different change now for sure compared to when you're a kid and you're going to school and again like you have to balance both of those worlds, but now it's like it's way more accepted, so it's a lot better.
You mentioned how, like, growing up when you would go home, like, it's different. You knew the standard was different because you were going home to Eritrean parents. I guess,
Yeah.
can you explain, I guess, maybe more specifically what that means for maybe people who don't understand? Because I think in my own context, I understand just with Ghanaian parents, just the the precedent that homework took and just all these
Yeah,
different things. But like,
it's hard being an African
yeah.
like in an African household because like the expectations are so different.
Mhm.
But no, like honestly, I don't even think this is even just Africans. Like, man, I went to middle school with the girl. She was Hmong. Milwaukee has like a really, I think it still has a big Hmong population, I think. But there was a girl that I went to, man. She was in one of my classes, man. She was so strict. She was so brilliantly smart. She's one of the smartest people I've ever had in my fucking life. And she got straight A's like every semester. There was one semester where she got, I think, like a B plus in the class. Okay. She came back, man, and she had a haircut. Like, her hair was long, like,
Yo,
to her shoulder, and her hair was cut a little bit shorter,
dog,
and she was like, her dad just wasn't having it, that she got a B plus instead of the A. And
dog.
so, when I tell people I don't think it's ever been anywhere near a little bit close to that, but, like, when I tell people what it's like being, like, the child of, like, immigrant parents in America, like, that's the type of pressures we gotta deal with,
Mhm.
like, because there's so many, like, expectations for us, rightfully so, right? Like, our parents fought to get to this country, and they fought to give
Yeah.
us an opportunity. We better knock that out the park, right? Like, we better make sure that we make sure the sacrifices were worth it, you know? And so, I didn't have to do anything like that. I got long hair now, and if my parents ever made me cut this, I'd probably be sad. Um, but there was just a lot of different expectations, right? Like I couldn't. My homies are like kicking it on a Thursday night at a bowling alley. Ain't really like that. My parents were like, "No, you gotta do your
Dog,
homework. You gotta
I
study.
wouldn't be able to do that either. I couldn't do
Can't
that. That wouldn't
can't,
slide at all.
can't do it." You know, I tried to
Mhm.
play sports when I was younger, right? I mean, it would make sense, right? Like we love sports for a living. Of course, I would want to play sports, right? My parents are very much of like practice after school. What do you mean you have to go to practice? You have to come home and do your homework, and you have to study, and then you have to get ready for school tomorrow. You're not going to practice until like for 2 or 3 hours. Like they could, but so there's some barriers in that way where like my parents couldn't understand. Like, no, I have to balance that, right? Like I got to be able to balance that. But they, no, they're in charge. They run the show. I can't challenge my parents about that, right? So there's just a lot of those types of rules in place for parents in African households, especially I think at least in an Eritrean household like mine was, like, I couldn't really do after school activities like that unless it was like, hey, if you want to play music, you want to play the piano, you can go do those piano
Yeah.
classes after school, right? You want to play soccer, you can go play soccer, right? But football, basketball, I don't know about that one. Like they just weren't really about it like that. And then it's like, think about stuff on the weekends, right? Like even on the weekends, a lot of times I spent it with like some of my homies in my Eritrean community. Like that's really what it was, or like people in my neighborhood where like my parents knew that they could watch me. They knew that I wasn't leaving their sight. They're very
Mhm.
protective in that type of way, rightfully so, because it's crazy out here. But it was limited in that way, and I don't ever, as an adult now, I don't ever like fault my parents or anything like that, or like blame my parents for like why I'm not like a D1 athlete today or something like that, or like I have these feelings towards my parents for limiting me in that way because my parents did ultimately what they felt was the best for me, and I
Mhm.
can't be mad at my parents for doing the best with me that they could. Right, my parents,
Mhm.
they gave me a roof over my head, they gave me food, they gave me an opportunity to go to school. The rest of it, yeah, I wish it could have been a little bit different. I wish I could have played football more. I wish I could have played basketball more. I wish I could have did more extracurricular activities, things like that, right, and had like more of that normalized, like I want to say normalized, more of like an American student type of life, right? But ultimately, that's just not what it was for me. My parents did the best that they could with me, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm always going to pay it forward for that. Now, my job as a now an adult, and hopefully hopes to have kids one day. And so now I can now be able to kind of break that. And now if when I hopefully have children, my children, if they want to play football, they can go ahead and do that. I'm not going to do those same things my parents did to me because I have a better understanding now, right? My parents gave me this opportunity now to kind of pay it
Mhm.
forward. So that's
Mhm.
just kind of how I look at it now. Like I look back at it, I think, man, I would have been good at football if my parents let me play a little bit more, right? Or
Mhm.
if they would have let me invest in baseball more after school or whatever the case may be. I I don't try to think about that stuff because ultimately my parents did the best that they could with me, and they gave me an opportunity at life. They gave me a good opportunity for school, and hey, man, I'm still successful. So that's kind of what I'm grateful for, and I just look back on it in that type of way now.
So because of the structure in place, right, with your family, your parents, how they raise you, how has that shaped your perception on what success and achievement means in your career?
Yeah, I think for me, it's fascinating because like I'm an overthinker. I I've realized that I've done some people remind me a lot of times that I do and have done some really cool in my career. Right, I'm a big overthinker where like I kind of undersell myself a lot of time. But I look back at like some of the places that I've been able to work and some of the projects that I've been able to work on, some of the people that I've been able to meet, and I'm like, that's actually really cool, right? Like, and so I used to be like really hard on myself. I think because my parents were really hard on me, right? Like I know a lot of people, I think, in African households that are like that, they're just very hard on themselves because they have a high expectation, they have a high bar for things, but they're just kind of instilled in us, like, when we were younger, right? But I think for me, I look at, like, happiness, and I also look at, like, success, right? As, like, how do I feel, right? Like,
Mhm.
do I have memories of things that I really care about that I look back on, I'm like, I remember that. That's something that's a core memory to me, something that I really value, right? Do I have these type of things in my life? And I do. And to me, that counts as success now. Like, that's how I kind of look at success is like, do I have memories of things that like I really enjoy, periods of my life and moments that I was able to accomplish? I'm really proud of what I was able to do. And I do. And I've been able to now define success for me in that type of way. And I think that is like that's one of the most essential things I think a lot of people need to do in general, but especially people that come from African households, whether they're Eritrean or Ethiopian, whatever the case may be, is like you get to define what success is for you. Like not your
Mm.
parents, not what society is. Ultimately, you get to decide that. So I have decided to do that for myself, and I look at some of the things, and I'm like, I kind of undersell myself for a while, and I've gotten older, and I've got to be able to be more reflective and like intentional and think about my career. I'm like, man, I've done some pretty dope shit, man. Like I've done some pretty nice stuff that frankly, a lot of people one in journalism have been able to do. A lot of people in my culture have never been able to do. And frankly, what a lot of people from Milwaukee have never been able to do. I've done some
Mhm.
really dope shit that like I kind of look back on and I count that as success. I count that as something that like I'm really proud of like some of the things that I was able to do that I define as success now. So that's kind of how I view it now. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate and kind of see success in that type of way as something that I get to define and not my parents or other people.
Speaking of your own definition of success, though, what are some of those specific things in your career, what have you, that you look at as success, as you're kind of talking about and creating your own definition of what that means?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is again, I think back to like my time covering the Bucks. Like covering an NBA team in college is fucking crazy, right? And
Mm.
a lot of people don't know this because it's like it's. I realize now, and I realized this the other day. I'm getting old because I was doing this in college, right? Like that was literally 10 years ago. I was 20, 2012 through 2015 was when I was doing this, right? And I'm like, that's a long time ago now, right? Like I'm realizing that I'm older now, right? So a lot of people
Mhm.
just don't know this about me, right? Like, a lot of people now, for example, on Buck's Twitter, for example, I got little kids tweeting me wild sometimes. I'm like, "Do you know who the fuck I am?" Like, I used to actually cover the team, and, like, people would just say, like, crazy things to me sometimes. I'm like, "I used to actually cover this team when nobody gave a about them, right? I covered this team when they won 15 games in the season, okay? I was at every single game when they won 15 games, right? I was at Giannis's first press conference there when he couldn't speak a word of
Mm.
English and had a hideous
Yeah.
blazer that I still think is hideous to this day. Um, I think about like Brandon Jennings and Monte Ellis and covering that year when
Oh,
they made the
yeah.
playoffs, even though
Oh,
they were under
geez.
500. Yeah, like
Mhm.
I think about stuff like that. I think about like all the things that I was able to kind of do, right? Just doing that at like in college and at that age where I was actually reporting, like going to every single game, going to so many, almost all the practices, going to some of the road games that I was able to go to, getting sourced on like ESPN, getting sourced on CBS Sports as a college student, which was crazy to me to be able to do some of the things that like I'm doing internships for, right? So I look at that stretch specifically as like a real highlight of my life. And I never thought that like the first period of like my career in journalism would be like the best part of my entire career. But I really do look at that as like the highlight of my career. I thought, of course, that was just the start of what I had hoped to continue more in like the reporting space. It didn't turn out that way, but ultimately I'm very happy and I'm grateful for that time. I look back on it today as a time that like I'm excited to talk about because I knew but I never took that for granted. I never took being able to cover my hometown team in my city as a black man like for granted. And so that's definitely one of the highlights for sure. Like I covered a whole playoff series against the Bulls in 2014, I think. I can't remember the exact year, but I covered that whole entire playoff series, going to the road game, home games, the whole entire series. Kobe Bryant's last game in Milwaukee, like being
Mm.
able to be a part of that was like it felt like a movie, and I still remember that day today, like, just what it felt like, and so that was, like, something that I always think about, all the time. Yeah, I think about my time with the Seahawks, as well, like, that was my first time ever leaving Milwaukee, And there were so many
Mm,
things I had to learn about myself, and just the way I think that I was able to really go there and quickly embrace Seattle and embrace a new job. Like right before the season started, I never lived in Seattle. I knew nothing about Seattle when I moved there, and I moved in August. I had one preseason game under my belt right before the season started in 2016, and I just went there and I busted my ass. And I view that as like success, like to just go into a whole new environment where I don't know nobody right before the season starts, to go in and have a great year where I'm just like writing so many different stories. I'm learning on the fly. I'm growing. I'm adapting as an adult. Like that counts as success to me. And then, some other things I think about is like, I mean, Amazon. Like, there's no fucking way I'd ever thought I'd ever work at Amazon. Like, especially being a journalist in college and or anything. And a lot of people don't realize this, but working at Amazon is really hard. It is really difficult. It is not for the weak-hearted. And
mm,
when I say Amazon, for people that don't know, I'm not talking about the warehouse. I'm talking about like even in the corporate space, which is not as dire as like the warehouse, of course, but the corporate space was a challenge. I had no
mm,
tech background, right? I only had journalism skills, so I had to
mhm,
learn every single product in the book at Amazon. I had to learn, the style in which they write things, how they document things, their way for data collection, like how they make decisions. Like you can't be at Amazon if you're not really ready to get into the trenches and like stand on like documents and stand on like discussion and things in that way. You gotta be wired differently to work there. And I worked there for a good amount of time. And it was for me, it was like it was the greatest, I think, experience that I got from my career, because it showed me how valuable I was. So that when I look now on my career and where I'm able to be at, and I was able to do the Amazon thing, and I know I feel like I can do anything else. So it's moments like that that are just like super cool to me. I think about just the things that I was able to endure and the moments that really helped me grow. Man, that's success. Like finding moments of your career and of your life that really were able to impact you in a way where you look back on, you're like, I can't believe I did that. Like that's success to me. Like that is being
mm.
able to look at something and being like, I really was able to learn, really was able to grow. I wasn't complacent, and I was able to gain something more valuable. I was able to learn something about myself in those type of situations. So those are a few of them, but it's been a long, different type of journey for me, and ultimately I've been able to, there's been ups and downs, but ultimately I've been able to look at a lot of the different places that I've been at. I've been happy with some of the success that I had.
In August of 2019, you posted a photo of yourself on Instagram. The caption said, "quote My life changed when I stopped apologizing for who I am." What I mean, I know that was what 5 years ago, but
Yeah,
where was your headspace at that point in time? What maybe compelled you to put that out there?
man, that's a good question. Cause that's when I was like, I'm off of Instagram now. I mean, I still have my account,
Yeah.
but I haven't been on there in months. But that's when I was trying to be in my Instagram thought type of days. I was just trying to say,
Oh
I
yeah.
was just really like in a zone, and I was just like, I was feeling myself and
Uh
whatnot.
huh.
But I think at that time in my life, that's when I was 20. That's when I was 26. That was a point in my life where I think I realized that, and it's kind of cliche because you hear this all the time, but like sometimes it takes a little bit of time for something to really hit you. But that's the point where I realized, like, man, people are gonna hate me regardless. People are not gonna like me regardless of if they know me or if they don't know me or not. So I should really just be who I am and not worry about that, because I can go be friends with certain people, or I can never talk to people at any point. And there's just tons of people that are going to feel a type of way about me that have never held a conversation with me, right? Like, even to this day, I think about how many people there are that never held a real one-on-one personal conversation with you, right? Never ever talked to you about a certain type of thing, but they feel a type of way about you and they judge you. And it's like, how can you sit there and judge somebody or feel a type of way about somebody you've never had a real honest conversation about? And so,
Hmm.
like, stuff like that is what I thought about, where I was like, why apologize for just, why should I apologize for just being me? Like, this is me. Like, everything changed for me once I just started realizing that, like, I should just be who I am, focus on, like, myself as a person. And there's people that are going to come along into my life that are going to be there forever or be there for a year or two or 6 months. and then people that
Mhm.
are gonna come along, and it's not gonna be anything. So it's just I just realized ultimately that regardless, I should just really focus on being the best person that I can be, and trying to be somebody that I'm genuinely happy with, and that's what really matters.
As you look at how your career has gone, how you've changed careers, and I know we've had discussions, with our friends group chat about kind of the struggles you've had, um, whether it be leaving sports media, going from Milwaukee to the West Coast, being in sports media, going to what Amazon, now at Mozilla. How is all of that, you think, maybe further that point you just made in terms of figuring out who you are? How did all that play a role in the discovery of yourself, do you think?
I think a big part of it, honestly, of me discovering like who I am today and the person that I want to be is when I left journalism. And I say that because I think for so long I grew up only wanting to be a journalist, right? Like that was the only thing that I wanted to be. That was what my focus was for 23, 25 years of my life, right? But again, like one of the best things that happened for my career was going to Amazon. And the reason why is because Amazon showed me like my skills are not just limited to journalism. Like
Mhm,
I am a such much more powerful person than I think I am. Like I went there and I like dominated. I did really good at the job. I'm like, I thought I was only good at journalism, right? I didn't think like, yo, I could go and be a tech and be successful at this and be
mhm,
really good. And that taught me like, yo, I'm a much more well-rounded person that can really take on anything more than like journalism. And I think for so long I was just so confined to the journalism world, and I had ups and downs in journalism, right? I had editors and people lying to me about different jobs that they wanted me for, constantly telling me that they wanted to hire me, even though they didn't hire me and they hired somebody that would be less qualified than me, which doesn't make any sense. But I digress. And it's just that you deal with a lot of that stuff, right? And you think like that's like your value, right? You think like in this industry, and I'm trying to make it work, right? And here, left and right, I'm getting lied to, I'm getting disrespected when I don't deserve it, right? And then you go in this other industry and you become really successful at it, and you realize like, yo, I've been hiding this potential for who I am this whole time, and I didn't know. So it really opened up my eyes to be like, I'm actually a much more well-rounded person than I am. And after that Amazon job, I started to explore so many other different things in myself personally. I started to travel
mhm,
more. I started to do yoga. Like I started to do a whole bunch of other things where I'm like, I don't have to just be sports journalism dude that likes sports and whatnot, right? Like I can be so much more
mhm,
broader as a human being now because of like that experience where I was like, yo, there's so many other things as a human being that I could really do. And so it just opened my eyes up to wanting to challenge myself to do other things. And when I came back to journalism, so background for people, I went to Amazon. Was in journalism, went to Amazon, and then I came back to journalism for the last few years. When I came back to journalism in the last few years of my career, my tolerance for the was so low after the Amazon experience, and because of having that discovery, my level was so low because I'm like, why would I sit here and deal with this from an industry that I was dealing with before, the same stuff I was dealing with before? Why am I dealing with this again at this later point in my career when I've been on the other side, right? I've been on the other side where I'm valued, I'm seen, I'm respected, I'm paid handsomely. I'm coming back to this because I really have a passion for this and I really want to do this, but my tolerance for the was so low. And so when I continue to deal with those same things over again, man, it was so easy for me to choose myself and to just leave and just be like, this is not it for me. This is not the space that I know that I deserve as a human being,
mhm,
because I realized that, man, I'm so much more bigger than journalism. And I don't try to say that in like in a cocky way, but I'm saying it from the perspective of like, as a person, I'm much more well-rounded than just what journalism can box me into and what it was boxing me
mhm,
into, right? Like, I realized that, yeah, I've been on the other side. Like, I've been in
mhm,
these other spaces where I'm seen and I'm viewed and I'm heard and I'm respected. I'm like, why am I putting up with this? And so that really was, I think, the that Amazon experience really was a
mhm.
really big opening for me to view myself so much bigger than I had never seen myself before. And it completely changed the way I saw journalism afterwards in terms of like my
Mhm.
own career. And it really changed my tolerance for things I just didn't want to deal with no more. And that said, I still value journalism. I still love journalism, but I respect it from afar, right? Like I can still have these relationships and this love for this industry that even though it boxed me into this certain box, whatever, but I still have that same love and respect for it just from a distance. So, and I've found other ways to love and support journalism away from it now. That
Mm.
to me is like this is like my new way to truly value and to still love and to support journalism now. Now that I'm not away, not now that I'm not in that space no more. And so I still always have like a soft spot for it. I'm still probably gonna do some freelancing stuff when I feel inspired. I don't know when that's gonna be, but I knew that ultimately I needed to make that jump away from myself because I knew I deserved it, and that all came from that experience a couple years ago where I just got to be able to see myself so much bigger than I was.
Mm. First of all, I love that. That's so powerful, and um, I think it's really interesting talking about just your experiences. Um, the skills we have as journalists are so much more valuable in other fields where there isn't too many people who have the exact same skills as us.
Yeah,
That's something I've really realized, right? Like if I were to
yeah,
go and be a science writer, like there's no one that can write in science in a way that people can understand. If I could take
yeah,
my storytelling ability and translate into a field where my upside is 200 times greater, um that's that's something I've started to think about more. I'm in a really good place in my career, but I hope a lot of people are hearing that who are journalists and
yeah,
even honestly who aren't, because I think regardless of what field you're in, you know, you may have skills in a particular field where it seems like everyone has that skill, but if you take that into a field that's looked at as more valuable or as more upside, then you could make maybe potentially a much better life for yourself and you still maintain that love for that initial field.
yeah. And like, there's so many levels to it though, too. Like,
Mhm.
I'm lucky for me. I've always been a multimedia person. So like, when I was
Yeah.
in college, I was doing writing, television, video, social media, photography. I did all that stuff. So it was super easy for me to transition. But even if we just focus on the crux of just writing, right? Writing in the corporate space is so valuable. And there's
Mhm.
so many people that don't know writing is a skill. Like it's a really hard skill that a lot of people do not have. By a lot of people, I mean once you get in tech, you meet a lot of software engineers, you meet a lot of other people in the tech world that just care about coding.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit about whether how you can write or the style in which you can write. But it's an extremely valuable skill. And there's so many
Mhm.
people that don't realize like you look at some of the biggest corporations, right? An Amazon, a Microsoft, or Google, right? They need journalists. They need people that can write. They
Yeah.
need people that can storytell because they got stories of employees. They have stories and narratives that they are trying to tell. And the best people to tell those people are people that are
Journalists.
yeah, journalists
Exactly.
that know how to professionally do it, right? And so
That's a
those
fact.
skills, the skills of journalism outside of journalism, people don't know, man. It is 1,000 times more valuable. And so the skills that you could easily take from journalism, just writing alone, right? I'm not even thinking about like we can also talk about video skills and photography, right, and all that type of stuff too. But just writing alone, like
Mhm.
that skill can get you so far in so many corporate spaces and so many other rooms that are outside of journalism that'll pay you more, that'll respect you more, that'll value you more. And there's so many people that don't know that. And I always am going to support people if they really are trying to make the journalism thing work, right? I'm always trying to be a supporter for people. But I'm going to tell folks, man, there's going to be a time where if you just get to a point where you just realize it ain't it no more, there's a pot of gold on the other side for you,
Mhm.
waiting for you with your skill set. And
Facts.
I don't think a lot of people are aware of it. I think a
That,
lot of
yep,
people are only,
I
they're
agree.
only seeing journalism like, man, if this doesn't work out, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I got a whole booklet of things I could tell people about
Facts.
the world outside of journalism where you could take your skills and double, triple your income and triple your
Facts.
job security and be able to make a really good life for yourself. Like one last thing I'll say is like I turned my last job, I was 30 at the Baltimore Banner. And at that point, there were some things, that left obviously me wanting to jump back into. Mozilla and go into the comp space. But there's a point, man, at 30, I realized, man, I'm not 22, right? If I want to be able to build the life that I want for myself, I want to have a house, if I want to have property, if I want to be have a brand new car, be able to have money and be able to save and have like a good financial, I don't say good, a better financial portfolio. I was ultimately had to look at myself and be real. I was 30 years
Mhm.
old and I was like, I'm not going to get a job that's going to pay me anywhere near to get to the path that I want to be until I'm what, 33, 34. And I was like, why would I'm not gonna sit here and wait and do this no more. I'm not going I had to be real with myself financially and be real with my goals that I have for myself in my life. And I looked at it and I was like, man, this isn't gonna work out for me. And I've already seen the other side of this to where I know what that can look like for me financially. I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna get to the path that I want it to be financially and in my own personal life for my own growth if I just stuck
Mhm.
it out. And so that's what ultimately, I kinda looked at for myself too. And I knew, like, by leaving and making that decision for myself that, again, I'll still be connected to journalism. Journalism ain't going nowhere. I can still go write. I can go freelance easily to a lot of different places and continue to do storytelling and do journalism, but not as the main thing. Because the main thing as my main job, yeah, that's gonna need to make more money. I'm gonna need and I need different things now than I
For
did when I
sure.
was 21, 22, when I probably put up with a lot of that I'm just not gonna put up with now.
For sure. Winding down here, bro. Where can people go online or on social media to tap in with you, connect with you, learn more about you and everything you have going on?
Yeah, so the main place that people can find me is on Twitter. I'm just Aron Yohannes, AronYohAnnes, I used to be on Instagram, but I haven't been on Instagram in months. I still have my account on Instagram, but I haven't logged into that joint in months. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm probably gonna delete it because it has been so refreshing.
Mm,
But that's the main place that people can find me is on Twitter. I usually follow people back. I like building the community on there and being able to talk to people. So people can follow me on Twitter. That's the best thing to get in touch with me.
cool. And that's one for you. I kind of ask my guests this at the end of every episode. What is one thing you believe people could do more of to get a step closer to reaching their pinnacle, to maximizing their personal potential?
Ooh, that's a good question. One, and this is not my serious answer. One, improve their general awareness. A lot of people out here ain't got no damn awareness, bro. You ever walk in the street or you walk anywhere and you know so many people on their phone and don't know
Yeah.
that you're walking right behind them? That's the first thing I'll say. People have one thing that can greatly improve their lives is just improving your awareness to people around you and your environments. The second thing I think I'll say honestly is I don't want to get the cliche of saying like travel and because I just traveled, because that allows you to see so much more of the world. So I'll say work on your skill set. And when I say work on your skill set, I mean work on like amplifying your skill set and the different things that you can do. Because there's going to be somebody else out there that was probably going to pay you more money than what you might be currently getting with your current skill set or whatever. Like just improve the different skills that you have. Whether that's doing writing or video work or PR, whatever it is. Just try to enjoy and then try to take on a lot of different things to be able to improve yourself and to just have a whole bunch of different skill sets. The more skills that you have, the more versatile you can be to find a broad range of different jobs. And I can't say this, as a guarantee, but the more harder it might be for a job to get rid of you, right? If you have
Mhm.
layoffs or something like that, because if you got a whole bunch of different skills, right? You easily can pivot to
You're
something else, right?
valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, you're valuable in that way, right? Like it doesn't make you, of course, it doesn't make you fully immune to like layoffs, but when you look at jobs and the ways that they might be able to move people around, to save money or whatever the case may be, like just having more skills allows you to have flexibility in a type of way, and it does make you valuable. So that's the one thing I look back on, like in my career, that I was really happy that I did when I was in college. Is I just try to have a whole bunch of different skills, and so being able to go from being a reporter to then doing social media at Amazon, like to then doing more writing and different type of video work and different type of jobs now. So that that early foundation of skills that I had are still extremely prevalent today, and all the different type of jobs that I have all these years later. So that's the one thing I definitely say for people is to just refine your skills, improve them, and just give stuff a shot.
Love it. Aron Yohannes, appreciate you, my boy, and thank you to all you listening, whether YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you tap in. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate the support. You guys make this show possible on a weekly basis. If you can, leave a comment, give me some feedback, give me a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcast. That goes a long way to helping me continue to produce and do this show. But you guys know the deal. I'll be back next Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central Time. We're gonna keep it going. But until next time, I'll see you guys soon. All right, peace out.